Would you feel more comfortable on an improv stage or canoeing in the backcountry? Find out which Book Interrupted member you're most like by visiting www.bookinterrupted.com/members.
Parental guidance is recommended because this episode has mature topics and strong language. Here are some moments you can look forward to during this episode of Book Interrupted.
Even looking at how the last conversation with and how this one gets to a point where it's almost fun and it's weird.
When you notice things, you're like, wait a minute, that's ridiculous.
Notice in my dreams people with different skin color.
And until I can be like, yeah, racist. Oh, yep, racist.
Because I don't categorize myself as not white.
That all of a sudden, like I felt like I earned this badge because I read this book.
Rockabye, white people. You're gonna be okay. We know you're fragile. And you're racist as well.
Mind, body, and soul. Inflammation is the goal. Try to learn something new without being distracted. Mind, body, and soul. Information is the goal. Trying to learn something new without being disrupted. Mind, body, and soul. Inspiration is the goal. And we're gonna talk it out on Book Interrupted.
Welcome to Book Interrupted, a book club for busy people to connect and one that celebrates life's interruptions. If you'd like to join along, this book cycle is from May 9th to June 13th. It's the fan book choice, and Squiggy will be joining us for this book cycle. The book that we're reading is White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. In this in-depth exploration, this book examines how white fragility develops, how it protects racial inequality, and what we can do to engage more constructively. All right, so it's personal journal time. Let's see what the members of Book Interrupted thought outside the group.
This journal actually is going to be focusing around the first recording for Book Interrupted. I've read the book now twice. Well, technically listened to the book twice, so I'm not going to have progress on these journals of reading the book, but perhaps a reflection of how the first recording went would be entertaining, and it went well. It was just a good primer. We talked obviously about racism. Some people had just started the book. Other people had done far more in-depth research, and it was a safe space to explore things. Some people were scared, and talking to white people about racism does scare them. So it does need to happen. The discussion does need to happen. So giving an opportunity and a safe space and making sure that my intro went smoothly and that I'm not here to point a finger, I'm not here to judge, allowed for the foundation for a lot of discussion to happen. I had fun. I got some of my ideas out there. I think some people will be moving forward on various ideas that were spoken about, and it was beneficial. It's not something that can be easily measured, but it explored some things that I hope white people are taking the time to reflect on things, and that's what really matters. So yeah, I look forward to what they actually have to say when they finish the book. I am more excited for the points, the topics to be book specific. We touched upon a handful of things in the forward, in the intro, but especially the white women tiers and the getting to the binary of good and bad racists is a great discussion to have that I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to watching them have the discussion about white women tiers. All right, I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Hey, so this is my second personal journal for White Fragility. I'm about 2 chapters in, and man, there's so many things about this book that I'm learning and reflecting on what is happening in my own life and what has happened growing up. I mean, so many things, about the fact of the challenging individualism and reflecting on our group membership, changing our beliefs and objectivity, that race like a gender is socially constructed, that race science was created in order to justify enslavement and colonization, and that actually, and this is a quote, exploitation came first, and then the ideology of unequal races to justify this exploitation followed. and that everyone's prejudiced, everyone discriminates. The percentage of white people who are the most powerful in the most powerful institutions in the US. I mean, I've written so many notes just from the first 2 chapters. And I think I just need to read more of this book, and then I will talk more. So I'm going to keep this brief because I really want to just dive in and finish reading this book and reflect more on my own personal contribution and hopefully ways that I can not have white fragility. I don't know. Can you not have white fragility? Sorry, that's probably not right. I just need to reflect, and I need to read more, and I need to learn more. So we'll see you in the next personal journal. Bye.
So I'm glad that we're reading this book, just for me personally. Like, it's not an easy book to read, but I think what it does is make you reflect on things that you've done in the past that you could have done differently, and how you could have done it differently, and maybe how I'll do things differently in the future. And the thing in the book that really got me is I'm such a passive person and like such an avoider of conflict at all costs. So I look at different things I've done in my life, and then I started thinking about how I had a friend who was Indigenous in college, and I made a racial slur then. I said something about Eskimos. And at the time, I didn't know that was a racial slur. And she just told me, and I'm forever grateful for that. And I think that instead of being afraid of the outcome, I should just tell people when I think what they're saying isn't, if I think it's offensive. And at least they'll think about it twice before they say it in the future. And I guess that's the point. That's how things are going to change. Yeah. So anyway, this book really is making me think a lot about the things I've done in the past, made me feel like I wish I did them differently. And hopefully I'm going to be braver in the future to say something at the time instead of passively saying it later, or beating around the bush, or painting a different picture, or not saying something directly to someone, but either passively aggressively or just full passive. Anyway, so that's helping me just reflect on how I can be different.
And I'm back for my uncomfortable personal journal. Yes, it is still very uncomfortable, but is that a bad thing? I think it just feels bad because we want to alleviate discomfort. But no, I need to stay in this discomfort because that's what I got to do. Holy cow, this book is blowing me away. I can say with absolute assurance, I totally understand why the author added as the subtitle, why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. Yup. Yup. And to that, I would like to share this passage from page 72. It blew me away completely and totally, almost knocked me off of my chair. It says, while making racism bad seems like a positive change, we have to look at how this functions in practice. So I'm intrigued at this point, right? Within this paradigm, to suggest that I am racist is to deliver a deep moral blow, a kind of character assassination. It's like the author understands, having received this blow, I must defend my character. And that is where all my energy will go, to deflecting the charge rather than reflecting on my behavior. In this way, the good-bad binary makes it nearly impossible to talk to white people about racism, what it is, how it shapes all of us, and the inevitable ways that we are conditioned to participate in it. If we cannot discuss these dynamics or see ourselves within them, we cannot stop participating in racism. The good-bad binary made it effectively impossible for the average white person to understand, much less interpret, racism. I have absolutely contributed towards this binary mode of thinking, of just keeping racism or being a racist as solely a good, bad thing. And of course, I would want to defend my position and claim that I am not a racist. And I didn't realize how words are so important to this learning, to this discussion. It's not about assigning a label of I am a good person because I am not a racist, or I am a bad person because I am a racist. It's inviting ourselves to get out of that binary mode of thinking, because that's where the true learning and reflection can take place. That passage blew me away. This book is incredible, absolutely incredible. I think I'm going to remain scared to the very end to continue reading it, but it's a thankful kind of scared. It's a necessary one.
I'm almost done. I'm up to chapter 9 of 12. I actually, full disclosure, I switched a lot of it I got it on Audible. I find it hard to take in the information on this one with reading it. So it's been kind of nice to listen to it and rewind and listen to it again and kind of, I don't know, it feels like it's going in easier this way. So that's kind of interesting. It's a tough read/listen because the information is so intense. One chapter that's really stuck out to me, I don't know if I mentioned it in my last personal journal or even if I was there yet, but is chapter 5. It's called The Good Bad Binary. And that chapter really helped change my perspective and open myself up to the ideas, I think, in a fuller way, because it released my thoughts about, racists are bad people and kind of like the full extent. Holy smokes, this is like, I find talking about this book in general, I'm stumbling over my words a lot. Maybe it's because the topic makes me nervous, but, I think of a racist as like almost like an extremist, and I don't think of them as like a good person. But then that chapter really opened my mind about like, there's so many levels of racism built into the cake of our society, our westernized society at least, and how that shapes us all in this way that whether I like it or not, I am racist and I do participate in racist actions by participating in the system. And that is hard to say. Like, nobody wants to think of themselves, well, I don't want to think of myself as a racist, but I'm certainly participating in a system that is very white centric and doesn't maybe allow for other ethnicities or people of color. It doesn't make room as much as I just never thought about it. It's really an eye opener. And that chapter really helped me think about, a racist isn't just a white supremacist. There's so many levels, and to start really seeing where you can make changes. Sorry, I stumbled over my words so much. It's just like it's an intense topic, and it's a really hard new information to take in. And I'm ashamed to say that I just hadn't really thought about it before, but I'm glad I'm learning. And yeah, it's just good information. So see you on the next one. I guess the book report's next. I better get reading or listening because I'm a stinky cheater using my ears, not my eyes. All right. Bye, guys.
This is my second personal journal for White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. Pretty early in the book, she calls out white people for giving predictable answers when she asks them about racism. She tells us that there's two Western ideologies that contribute to this, namely individuality and objectivity. Individuality is the idea that we're all unique, even within our social group, and objectivity is the idea that we can have opinions without bias. And because we grew up in this cultural framework, it's hard for us to talk about the white experience as a whole, which is very important. We're going to talk about white supremacy and white fragility and white people as a race. This part really spoke to me because I see myself in that. My individuality is very important to me. And I do like to think about how I'm the same as other people, but also how I'm different and unique. And there's something she said in there. She said to generalize is breaking a cardinal rule. And I really do hate generalizations. I hate being put in a box. We talked about this a lot when we read Women Who Run with the Wolves and Untamed as well, which is about being put in a box and trying to fit into that box. But that's what white supremacy does to everybody who is not white. And so I really enjoyed that because she called me out, and I thought it was a good intro to the book, talking about how we grow up in a culture, and that cultural framework informs who we become, what our implicit biases are, and our personalities, how we view the world, and how we view others. And she also said that another part of being white, I guess, she says that a significant aspect of white identity is to see oneself as an individual outside or innocent of race, just human. And I can't even count the number of times I've heard maybe myself or someone else say, well, we're all just human. And I think this is, you can say it, but if society as a whole is treating non-white people differently, then culturally, I guess we don't really believe that, do we? So I thought it was a good intro to the book for me. She drew me in by calling me out.
I think that this book is really important. I think that having words to describe experiences that were formerly going unacknowledged, or if that's a word, or ignored, is the best part of this book. And not all of the books, but the movement toward dismantling white supremacy and anti-racism. I think it's the language part of it has been very important. It's been integral in the ability to dismantle. If you don't name it, you can't claim it. I don't know if that's lame. Anyway, I think that the work is important, and I think that this book is important. And I think that if any person, specifically a white person, has the courage or the curiosity to pick up this book and read it, then that is a great thing. What happens after that, we don't have to worry about right now. Just breaking down that first barrier of even being willing to open your mind to the potential of hearing the information is a huge accomplishment anyway. Like I said, I read a different book first, and that book was a little bit more in my perception. I mean, it was just my experience, but it could have been because it was the first book that I read. So I experienced my white fragility in reading that book. So when I came to read actually White Fragility, I had already been through some of that painful process and come around to being able to accept some things. But I think that it's a good book for white people to read. Like Squiggy was right. All white people should read it. It doesn't mean you have to do anything. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Just read it, right? Because the beginning seed that's planted by it can't be undervalued. It's an interesting process that a person goes through. I've witnessed it in a number of different people who have been introduced to these ideas. And it's funny how predictable it is. Like white fragility is a thing. Like it's like proven, I mean, based on my like observation of 3 people. But these books are written because it's based on the observations of many people for many years. So the fact that, again, I'm coming full circle, there are words to name what's been going on is a great step forward in this movement. So I enjoy this book, and I enjoy reading these works, and sometimes struggle with how to move forward from the point of opening my mind to these concepts. But just because I struggle doesn't mean that it's not worth doing. It might even indicate more that it's worth doing. It's going to be hard, if it's still worth doing. So I'm committed to, I can't go backwards. That's the other thing too. Once you have this information, you can't go backward. Anyway, in reading this book, I'm moving forwards.
This interruption is brought to you by Unpublished. Do you want to know more about the members in Book Interrupted? Go behind the scenes? Visit our website at www.bookinterrupted.com.
Book Interrupted.
My interruption is computer trouble. Boo! My computer died right before the deadline for tax season, and I just couldn't get it up and running again. I was so frustrated with just PCs in general that I went ahead and bought a Mac. I was still trying to fix the original computer with the various customer service people, and it's just so painful. But this frustrating story has a happy ending because the Mac is really user-friendly. I know everybody says that, but it's just really nice to experience.
Book Interrupted.
Let's listen in to this episode's group discussion. Welcome to our group discussion for White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. I don't know if you guys mind, but I wouldn't mind going first because I had a moment sharing to someone that I was reading this book, and it was like a learning moment. So I was telling someone here that I was reading, we're reading White Fragility for our book club this book cycle. And they said to me, "Oh, is that why you started using the term people of color?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess so." And they're like, "Yeah, so I don't know what's socially acceptable in America, but I find that really offensive. I don't look at myself as someone not white. Like I don't categorize myself as not white. And that's what saying people of color means to me. And I would prefer if you said Senegalese or African or even black." And I was like, "Oh, so sorry."
I like that.
So I thought I'd share that because the book, so I started using the language in the book and they were like, "Oh, that's why you started using that term." And they were like, "Yeah, I find that really offensive because I don't categorize myself as not white." Yeah.
That's interesting. I never thought of that at all.
Yeah.
It didn't even occur to me. There's so many things in this. In general, the more I've been researching about this book and then also reading this book, but things that I just had no idea the language that I used would be taken in a different way than, well, maybe that I meant or that, I don't know, that I feel like there's just so many things in our language and culture that we just do that is offensive to people.
Yeah. This person was like, it was really I find it really offensive. And like, it was just out of the blue, you started using this term. And I was like, oh, yeah. But I don't know what, maybe they were like, maybe in America, like that's something that people say, but right.
She does also contextualize the book as it being Western and colonizers. I'm not sure about Senegal's history per se, but I definitely wouldn't use person of color when I walk around India, just because that puts me in a different context when discussing racial matters. And it's one of those balances that I went to Peru and learned about the Chinese slavery there. It blew my mind because I'm like, oh God, there's other histories around the world. So it's that matter of colonization and what we were taught in the education system that really puts us in a bubble that until you step out of that, you're like, oh, there's all these other cultural protocols.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. And like, since our show's also, we have listeners on 46 countries around the world, it's just something to be mindful of that this book is written by the U.S. perspective. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that we're all within the Western colonized state of mind of how we've been socialized that way.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, I found the whole experience of this book uncomfortable. Like, there was no uncomfortable. It was like, the layers of, I think we talked about, she even talks about it in the book about like rationalizing your like, oh, well, my best friend's black and, or a person of color and like this person. And, I dated a whole bunch of other ethnicities, like whatever it is. Like I started to do that too. Sarah touched on that. Like, and that part was like, when she mentioned it in the book, it was so like unnerving. You're like, oh, she knows I did that. And then just along the way, just like, I said this a lot in my personal journals, but like it took till about chapter 5, and chapter 5 was like my like TSN turning point of like, that I could take in the information, because chapter 5 was about like the good bad binary. And it was, I think, really just, she broke it down in those terms, like good people aren't racist and bad people are racist. And that's not true. Like there's all levels. We can't help ourselves. That I finally could take in the information and really see where I am. Well, without choice, I'm participating in a racist society, but where I'm lying to myself and like where I could like almost rein it in. Like there are things I could do differently. Not all of it's forced on me by my society. Like I'm just have a lot of blinders on, as it turns out. Yeah. And that's uncomfortable to say.
Totally. So for me, my experience of this book was opposite though, because I read Me and White Supremacy first, which is not so. Like, I feel like White Fragility from a white person to white people is almost nurturing, if you could say that, in delivering the message, because they know, this isn't going to be easy. white fragility, right? And so they try to make it as the message as digestible as possible. And that is not the feeling you get when you read Me and White Supremacy, which is fine, right? But for me to have that experience first, I had my full blown white fragility reaction to Me and White Supremacy. And then reading White Fragility is almost like, oh, it's so nice to have it, explained in this way to me. Like, I don't know, like as if this person, I feel like nurtured is the best way to put it, but it's only because of my personal experience, because I felt uncomfortable or upset from Me and White Supremacy, again, as because of the recognition of the ways that you are racist. That's something I was thinking about today. I put this in my personal journal, is trying on the phrase, like saying out loud, I'm so racist, and being okay with saying it, because it's not that binary. It is the outcome of the society I was so socialized in. And until I can be like, yeah, racist. Oh, yep, racist, whatever. You can't not be racist or work towards not, perpetuating racism. So my point is that I liked the way that the message in White Fragility was delivered, but the message nonetheless is...
It's like it coddled you.
Yeah, it felt nice. But
Squiggy and I were talking about earlier how you listened recently, just like last night, to the book on audio tape, Squiggy?
Yeah, I crammed last night for this.
Yeah, you did a cram sesh. And the voice they chose to do it is very like, rockabye, white people. You're gonna be okay. We know you're fragile. And you're racist as well. Yeah. The voice is also so like confusing with the content.
The balance I found with people, though, is that once they've worked through that awkwardness or the uncomfortableness, then it almost becomes easy to recognize and you become comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely stemming off that disregard of that good, bad binary. So it's like, okay, I'm not evil. And I've had to deal with this with feminism / misogyny. And like, I am not an evil man, though I would in one back in the day make a period joke or something like that. Working through that awkwardness or that uncomfortableness or hitting that TSN turning point is then when you're like, okay, I'm through this. And even looking at how the last conversation with and how this one is hoping to go is that it gets to a point where it's almost fun and it's weird to talk about anti-racism and self-awareness and self-reflection, but also be able to smile and laugh and work through it. And it's just weird once you break through that uncomfortableness, to be able to work on those things is actually productive and weirdly enjoyable.
Yeah. Like once your blinders are off, you see all this stuff, you're like, man, I didn't even know. And it's such a great, like what KJ's saying is, Kim, it's such a great beginning book to talk to for white people to read who want to do anti-racism stuff. I've talked to some people and about this book I'm reading, and a lot of people don't know what white fragility is, like many of us didn't before the book. It's just people actually want to talk about it, but it is funny, like when you notice things, you're like, wait a minute, that's ridiculous, right? Like, I don't know, my husband hasn't read this book, but I've been talking to him about it. And I'll be like, hey, this is ridiculous, right? And like, we'll have a laugh about how ridiculous something is. They're like, oh, I got to say something about that or whatever, right? And then it becomes easier to be like, look how ridiculous is.
So I had just read the part, White Women Tears, and how having someone that you offended, like console you for you offending them. This isn't like that situation didn't happen except for I got pulled over by a police officer and I couldn't find our insurance tag, and he's like, you can't leave without it. And there's always this like language barrier for me because my French is horrific. And I was like, I know I have one. I just have to call my husband anyway. And my husband was picking up and whatever. And by the end of it, I started crying and he let me go. And I was like, oh, there we go. Just did it. Just cried myself out of a ticket.
Yeah, but not in a racist way.
Not in a racist way.
Just in a tickety kind of way.
Right. It's not the same thing, but it made me think of how I'm doing something wrong and I'm asking this guy to console me.
It's not his problem that you don't have the insurance. He's just doing his job. Okay, I understand your parallel.
Yeah, I'm going to write you a ticket now. And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. And he's like, okay, just go.
Do you know what's been happening to me, which is really odd and weird? So now in my dreams, people are different colored skin, which is weird because I don't remember people not having different, like I don't remember people having any, like maybe they were all white. I don't know. Maybe people just weren't, I just didn't notice. But now I actually notice in my dreams people with different skin color, which is odd to me. And I also have this like weird thing, and I've done some research about some criticism towards this book, but also just that like that now people are saying it might also reinforce stereotypes, and it's very condescending towards Black people. And because then now you're noticing and then you're going out of your way to do something differently that could be thought of as offensive. I don't know what everyone thinks about that. This is just in some articles I've read.
Like the whole using people of color, Sarah used that and ended up offending somebody, right? Like, I don't know, like, you know what I mean? Like you're saying something like that, where it changed your behavior and maybe that wasn't, I don't know.
Yeah, it changed my behavior and then it offended someone. But the thing is, I think the point of the book is it offended someone. I was talking openly about this book and they were okay talking openly to me. And then I was like, oh, sorry, I won't do that again. And I'll bring it up on my show. And they're like, okay, great, thanks.
I also think that the society is so like, it's so entrenched historically. But this book is, I think if it only had one small mission, is to get people talking about race, to get people comfortable talking about race, to get white people to acknowledge that race is a factor in things. And so if they're now going about it all fucking white and like wrecking it, then whatever, right? But at least they're talking about it, right? At least the conversation is now on the table. And I think so anything that is like a criticism of the book in that kind of a category, I think is a criticism, not necessarily forgivable one, but one that we can work with, because I think the point was to open the conversation, to begin the conversation where we talk about, yes, I see that you're different. Yes, society has been designed in a way to, based on what your difference is, keep you up or down or whatever, right? So nothing's perfect, right? And white people are totally going to fuck it up once they get all woke about it and go about on their missions now to save everybody. But at least they're trying, you know what I mean? At least they're talking about it, I think is at least a silver lining anyway.
Yeah. And I think also, I mean, what you guys were saying about it being an easy book to start with, like if you start with this and then you go to something different and you learn more and you're growing and stuff, I think that that's the best way to do it, as opposed to just reading this book and being like, now I know everything about everything. So yeah,
that off the list.
Check off the list. I'm not racist, or I am racist, or whatever.
Yeah, I think you have to
Like,
check
no.
that you are.
It's just like anything that's worth doing is going to be hard. You're going to do mistakes. Like if you're going to get good at anything, you have to, you kind of stumble forward, and every mistake you make, you get better, right? It's just, I think some people want it to be easy, and it's not going to be easy to change society. So entrenched, right?
I think, like, to Lindsay's point, like with the research you found and some of the like criticism about how, like, I can totally see that. I even noticed it in myself, that all of a sudden, like, I felt like I earned this badge because I read this book that allotted me the opportunity to go out there and be like, I'm a changed woman, I'm different. For myself, I think maybe that criticism is correct. Maybe there are some people that if we don't check ourselves and look at the motivators towards how we're stepping forward, there are some people that will read, there are some white people that will read the book and they'll go out there and, yes, like to Kim's point, like, yeah, it is good that they're wanting to be an active participant in change, of course, but like check yourself. Because if your motivator is posturing so that you can put yourself back onto the binary spectrum of being like reinforcement of I'm a good person, then maybe it is problematic, right? But if you're checking yourself and you're realizing that your motivator is stemming more from, I know better, therefore now I will do better. And I forget who coined that quote, and I might be paraphrasing.
It's Maya Angelou.
Is it? Yeah. Oh, my most favorite person in the whole world. Yeah, like we can't help those circumstances. And in fact, I would applaud anyone who recognizes that they're knowing or understanding or learning differently, and that they have perhaps a new lens, new perspectives brought about by a great book. And yeah, like do better, of course. But yeah, I think it absolutely, there's so much internal check-ins. Like I found, like to Leah's point, like it was around chapter 5 that I was turtling up and getting all tongue-tied and getting trapped in this loop of like political correctness. So I'm like, I'm just going to stay silent because I don't know what to say because I'm going to royally fuck this up and put my foot and multiple feet into my mouth. But then around chapter 5, when it got to like those binary of good and bad, I was like, okay, what is required of me on the inside to be okay with being imperfect? How can I continue to try to do better, knowing that it will come at the cost of sometimes epic failures? And so I just went back to like, there's a big mindset shift here. And I came across Brene Brown, her Unlocking Us podcast, this one episode with Austin Channing, I believe it is. And Brene shared, like, similarly, she had to develop like a go-to phrase or a mantra for herself to allow herself to feel okay with trying new things in new ways. And it was mostly around, I am not here to be right. I am here to learn how to get it right. And I found, it was around chapter 5 and then listening to that podcast episode that I was like, okay, my nervous system has calmed down enough to allow me to try again and then try again and then try again and then try again and be open to feedback.
I like the way that the author put it, because she said that she imagines herself on a continuum, and also like specifically pointed out that she's never going to be done or there or anything else. It's just a continuum. And as long as she's in every given moment working her best to kind of progress on the continuum, then she can count herself, I guess, good, worthy, whatever, but like count herself even successful. I don't know. Those words, I like, as all of them come out of my mouth. Moving in the right
direction.
Yes. Because I feel like all the words I just said they were too final.
Yeah.
And with this book, it was mentioned about the possibility of posturing. But like you just pointed out, in this book, if you read this book, if you've taken the time to read a book, that's more than just sharing a meme. So that effort there, I find with social media activism, is so lazy that the people that actually take the time to read a book aren't the ones that are most likely posturing about it. And then this book, if you actually read it, it puts you on a spectrum where you're not saying that, yes, I'm finished my job. The book itself doesn't give you a badge at the end of it. Mm-hmm. The book itself tells you that we're on this continuum, this spectrum, this moving forward. And that's why it is a good gateway book. And I don't mind it being criticism. I like critiquing it and writing in general, but it's almost like the pop music of anti-racism.
Totally.
It gets
Good
nodding,
analogy.
and then like you can't overanalyze it because it's just pop music. It's a short book, it's a window, it's a gateway, and then yes, you can go on to much heavier anti-racism books that is just far more in depth.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Book Interrupted. If you'd like to see the video highlights from this episode, please go to our YouTube channel, Book Interrupted. You can also find our videos on www.bookinterrupted.com.
Are you really connecting with a particular Book Interrupted member and want to hear more of what they have to say? With your free trial to Unpublished, you gain access to the Book Interrupted Inklings and real-life video content of our day-to-day challenges, thoughts, and opinions. Go to www.bookinterrupted.com/unpublished to start your free trial today.
Moments you can look forward to on next week's Book Interrupted.
Go to someone that's going to say, no, that was shit.
Yeah. And then the prison guards ended up acting violently. And
I don't want your sweaty candy, sir.
Technically, I'm not mixed, but emotionally, culturally, I am.
Megan, right? Did the Oprah interview and it was a big uproar. And
I like Sharon Osbourne.
I always think about that bystander thing, like when I see something.
Book Interrupted.